My name is Richard Uphoff. I'm the chair of the Human Development and Leadership Division, and I'd like to welcome you to this kickoff series, a kickoff in a series of webinars over the coming months that will be featuring members of our leadership panel, leadership team. And today we're starting with this first session of the year on leading self. So again, let me welcome you. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things before we get started. We will ask you to, we're going to ask people to do the chat, right? Only the chat? Okay, so if you have questions, we would ask, a couple of us are monitoring the chat, but because we want to keep people focused on answering the question, our panelists answering the question, if you have questions or comments, please keep it in the chat and then we'll try to watch your questions come in. But we have a series of questions that we're going to go through with our panelists here in a moment. But before we do, I just want to say a couple of words about who we are as a division. For those of you that may or may not be familiar, our division, Human Development and Leadership Division, is very unique within ASQ. We seek, as a division, we seek to be the global community of choice for everyone, making human potential and organizational and personal excellence a priority. That's what we do. And we do that by enriching the personal and professional lives of our members. That's hopefully all of you on this call. You can find out a little bit more about us on My ASQ. And just some benefits here we've listed for membership, but we have a great team. If you'd like to get more involved, please feel free to reach out to one of us through My ASQ, or we'll have a couple of our emails up here in just a minute. Our next, as I mentioned, this is the first of several webinars over the coming year around a new framework that we've developed. You're going to hear more about that framework from one of our panelists here in a moment, but some of the other events that we'll just put in a plug for will be involved in the ASQ Member Leader Conference at the end of March. We will have our next quarterly panel discussion, which you can look out on social media for advertisements or on My ASQ to hear more about that. And you'll hear a little bit about it from Doug here in a minute, but that'll continue quarterly for the rest of the year. And then we'd also invite you to our seminar at sea. We will be recommencing our seminar at sea, which we did a couple of years ago. Last year we did not do it because of the pandemic, but we're going to be kicking that off again in the fall. We're very excited about that. We've got a lot of pent-up demand, a lot of people very interested in this. So we are putting out, you can sign up, find out more either from one of us directly or through My ASQ, but we're very excited about offering that. We'll be cruising in the Caribbean, the Western Caribbean, and it'll be a chance for you to attend a conference at sea. So you'll get to cruise and attend a conference at the same time. So we're pretty excited about that. All right, I also want to put in a plug for some of the leadership roles that we have. We had our town hall just about a month ago, and a couple of folks attending our town hall have sought us out to get more involved, but we are looking for members to get involved, in any way. Either taking the lead on if cruising, if you're really interested in the cruise and you'd like to run point for us on that. We're always looking to improve our communication, improve our reach through social media. So if you're interested in getting involved in that, or organizing webinars such as this one, or even just being part of building out our competency framework, any role, large or small, we'd love to hear about it. We'd love to talk to you about it. So please feel free to reach out. We have a great team. Many of us have been working together on this division for many years. So it's a small but mighty group, and we're very excited to always bring in new faces. So with that, let me just introduce our panelists. I'm going to start with Doug Samuels. Doug is currently the manager of organizational development and consulting services at Georgia State University in Atlanta. He focuses on developing leadership bench strength at the university and engagement across the university and across the entire university system of Georgia. He uses the Baldrige framework for excellence in part of his day-to-day responsibilities. Doug actually holds a Bachelor of Science, a BS degree in mathematics from Valdosta State College. He also has a BS in computer science, a BA in psychology, and an MS in industrial organizational psychology. So Doug exemplifies this idea of continuing education. He's been a member of ASQ for 10 years and has held various leadership positions with our division. And in a former life, he flew very large planes for the United States Air Force. So thank you, Doug, for your service. Kiran Mann is the founder of M2M Business Solutions in Toronto, Canada. M2M is a people-centric business advisory company. She's an entrepreneur. She was recently cited as one of the top 10 inspirational CEOs and one of the best consulting firms in Canada in 2021 by Beyond Exclamation magazine. So we're excited to have Kiran part of our leadership team for several years. She's been helping Sidita to organize our webinars. She holds an undergraduate degree in economics and political science from the University of Toronto, and she has an executive MBA from Western University Ivy School of Business. She's been in corporate leadership positions in the automotive industry for more than 2 decades, and has been spending her time recently as the founder of this M2M Business Solutions 5 years ago. She's coming up on her 5th anniversary, and that is a company that focuses on helping companies transform their operations, optimize return on investments, and people and processes and technology. And then last but not least is Sidita Hasi. She is dialing in from Albania, and she is the chair-elect of the Human Development and Leadership Division, so she will be following in my footsteps 2 years from now. And she is also an entrepreneur and the founder of SH Excellence, which is a project management and continuous improvement consultancy based in Albania, but she does work with clients around the world. She's a leadership coach, a mentor, and a speaker. And even though she's originally from Albania, she spent the last 20 years in the United States and in Italy. She has experience working with and for several Fortune 100 companies. She's a certified professional, a project management professional, a Six Sigma Green Belt, and a certified Scrum Master. She also was participant in the MIT Sloan Executive Education Program and holds a Bachelor in Financial Economics from the University of Perugia in Italy. And as I said, she's the chair-elect for our division, just took over as the chair-elect. So a great panel of wide-ranging experience levels and a very diverse panel, which is what I'd like to say we're very proud of with our division. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug, because Doug has been at the forefront with several of our other member leaders building out our competency framework, which really sort of defines the competencies tied to leadership and human development in general. And Doug has spent the last many months working on building that out. So I'll turn it over to Doug. He is going to talk a little bit about this because this is unique to our division, and then we'll come back to our panelists for our discussion today. Oh, you're on mute, Doug.
Thank you, Richard. Got to get used to that coming off and on mute, right? Thank you for that kind introduction. Yeah, you know, the body of knowledge for HD&L, we've actually been working on that document for a long time, quite a lot of years, identifying those pieces of knowledge that were important to improving human development and leadership. It was initially, when we first started working on it, that's what we call it, the HD&L body of knowledge. I'd say within the last 6 months to a year, we've kind of transitioned to what we now call it, and that is a framework. So it's the HD&L framework, basically. And it focuses on competencies that are associated with human development and leadership, as you might imagine. One of the reasons that we kind of changed the focus of the body of knowledge to, excuse me, the competencies was because competencies are more user-friendly than just chunks of knowledge, which is what the body of knowledge was originally. So you're going to see some list of competencies here for one of the levels here and one of the levels in a minute. But that's the reason that we moved to this framework, because now we have competencies associated with different levels of leading, that I'm going to speak to in just a minute. And one can look at those competencies and understand what it is. And then we've identified 3 levels of proficiency for each one of those competencies. The overall framework is divided into the 3 levels that you see. That was good, Richard. 3 levels that you see there: leading self, leading others, and leading organizations. And it kind of starts with leading self. I mean, if you can't lead yourself, how can you lead others, right? That kind of makes sense. So you start with leading self, then you work with leading others, and then you work with leading organizations. So those are the 3 levels that the framework has been divided into, and we're going to talk a little bit about leading self. Richard, go ahead and go to the next slide. I think that's the list of competencies there for leading self. The 3 of us are going to talk about what leading self means to us in a minute, and we'll be a little more specific with regard to what leading self means to each of us. So that's kind of where we are with the framework. As I said, I think the key piece of the framework is that it provides actionable information for people, as opposed to our early development of the body of knowledge, which really wasn't focused on that. All right, that's the framework.
Okay, thanks, Doug. I'll just make 2 quick points here, and then I'm going to pull Sidita into the conversation here. The 2 quick points is, number 1, as Doug mentioned, we've been working on this framework fairly recently. What we realized is we as a division had put out a lot of content in some of these specific competencies. So we had webinars around, teamwork, or we had primers that we had done on conflict resolution, but we hadn't built out the entire framework into which that content would fit. And so that's one of the things that we're working on right now. But the second thing I'll just mention is that each one of these competencies represents an opportunity for you to get involved, because you may be an expert in one of these areas or feel that you have a lot of experience to share in one of these areas. And so I would encourage you, in the spirit of participation, I would encourage you to reach out to one of us to let us know how you might be able to either provide us content for this specific part of our framework, or to see how it could complement something that we've already done. So anyway, just a quick plug there for the work that we do as a division and how you can get more involved. So with that, let me just turn it over. Our first question, as Doug mentioned, right, this framework is built out into areas of leading self, leading others, and leading organizations. And that's going to be how these webinars are organized over the coming months. So today's series starts talking about leading self. The next one, we will start to talk about leading others or leading teams, and then it'll be around leading organizations. And so with this idea of leading self, I'm going to put the question out, and I'm going to start with Sidita, because Sidita has some thoughts about this. But the question to the panelists today is, like, when you personally think about leading self, what does that really mean to you? So I'm going to let Sidita speak a little bit first about that, and then I'll turn it over to Kiran, and then I'll come back to Doug. But this idea of leading self, what does it really mean to you? So Sidita, what do you think about leading self?
So thanks for asking me this question, and I would like actually to bring this question to the attendees as well. We are here to talk about leading self, but as the topic itself says, it's about self. So what works for me might not work for someone else. So try to hear, but try to see if there is anything that triggers you. That's what we are here for today. So we'd like to share our experiences and see how that shifted throughout time, what we learned from our experience, more storytelling approach, which is not the traditional. Here is the key formula for it. So let's use chat and see how people think as they hear these stories, as well as what's their story. So it doesn't have to be a question. Please use it for comments as well. And if you have any suggestions, these are things that it's a learn by doing experience for us as well. So as I'm here, I'm learning how to use WebEx today, because it's our first time using WebEx. So I appreciate your patience with that, and I hope you as well are not struggling too much with this new platform that we're using. So we're here to learn. That's something that I see myself doing every day. If we can actually go to the next slide, I did add some sort of visuals, because I started thinking today, I'm like, okay, it's leading self, I'm always learning, so it's gonna be easy. I don't even need to prepare for it for this webinar. And then I spent about 6 hours 2 days ago just writing an essay about my whole experience last year. And it allowed me to see patterns that I didn't even notice. And I was happy to see that I was a bit more structured in the way I led my year last year compared to previous years. And I'm glad to see that happening because it's becoming a second nature for me. Certain items and other items and actions that I've taken did not work for me. So when I think about leading self, I go all the way back. It takes me to my leadership background in my graduate studies, where I was writing a paper about leading, how you become a great leader, and then I went to the roots and the roots and the roots, and it ended up that where you can impact leadership really at its core, and it's a bit easier, even though it might sound for parents that it's not easy to lead your child, but that's where the genesis of this all happens. Like you are born and you have something in your DNA. It can be like genetics. So certain items are really biology. So there are certain things that might not change with time. So that's something important to be aware of and to get to know. So when it comes to leading self, know that core, know where what's in your nature. And then if you go an extra step and see beyond ourselves, if we can go next, Richard, then we have the upbringing. It doesn't matter where you're born. It doesn't matter what is your parenting model. Like 20 psychologists I've been talking to through the mentorship programs we have and throughout life, they all take you to the childhood. It's because of childhood. So I'm like, I had a perfect childhood. My parents are right there cooking for me, calling for me right now. And yet, when somebody tells me, go to your childhood, I didn't have a traumatic childhood. But then last year, I took a lot of time to reflect more, and you do start seeing patterns on maybe not my parents, but maybe the country I was born. I was for 50 years, not personally, because I'm not 50 years old yet, hopefully yet. But my parents' generation was raised in under communism until I became about 10 years old. So that did impact the way that they see it. Taking risk, like my father is more about like I want something safe. When they saw about my decision to move to US 20 years ago, in Italy initially, he was like, don't go to US, it's too risky, go to Italy, it's close. So that's how I ended up in Italy, whereas my brain fits in US. And then I ended up in US still because the DNA of the child in there, there is something about me that keeps like being okay with taking risks. So there is a lot of dynamics that we might not be aware because we're running with life, and maybe people who are risk takers just go with it and don't recognize these patterns. But there is something that we need to start looking around to the context when we take some time to look into ourselves before we start dealing with others. We need to first get to know ourselves before we start thinking that the issue is to somebody else's part, basically. And then as this becomes a bit more larger, there is also this context. So, okay, I'm thinking about what brought me up this way, but I'm also impacted by where I am right now, the way we lead ourselves and make our decisions. Like the fact that that might change if I'm sitting right here in Albania or if I was sitting in US when I was there. So I'm taking different decisions because of limitations. Like, for example, my background in operational excellence doesn't even exist in this country. Is this impacting how I move towards other opportunities? It does. So there is, yes, the DNA, yes, like how I was brought up with experiences I had, but also the context. So all these three dynamics bring me to think about who I am right now. I might not be responding the same way in another context of these three dimensions. And as we move forward, this context starts changing. So there is this little baby, the child in us that I always try to keep alive in me, and it comes naturally for me at least, to shift to a different, as time goes by, context changes. So we're trying to shift our nature, bringing those experiences with us and leading us to somewhere else and being aware of it. So that's why it's important to get to know yourself first, the context as well, because that might change, and then and see how you shift with that context that it changes all the time. It's a continuous reevaluating of the self. And as we move next, we might have certain times where this little baby is just scared of something, and I've had experiences where I just wanted to feel the baby again and feel safe and no more changes for me. I was sick and tired, but it was just like the flight or fight response that we have. So that's not something that I wanted something familiar. It's really just a scare and a fear type of moment. And we need to be aware of when this happens, because that might impact the decisions that we make and how we interact with what's around us and with our decisions, and put us far away from it. But another scenario that might happen as we move next to another scenario of this dynamics changing, we might have this core, I call it the baby, but because for me it's the core that brought with him the experiences, made it part of its own. Maybe it's moving backwards, not because it's just going to fight or flight all the way to the genesis of it in like a very heavy fear, but because it just wants something familiar. And something familiar is because the next thing he had, the closest thing he had as an experience, the dynamics that he had. So just moving to that dynamics, as you see in green there, he just wants to move to something that's familiar to it. And he's not leading himself consciously, or maybe he's just taking the shortcut, basically. And the goal here, after all this being aware and getting to know yourself, is really, as you see now, the gray area, which was the core being, is bigger than the context. So what we're trying to do, at least in my opinion, what I'm trying to do in my life journey, is yes, to watch the context, but I'm the one leading it. I'm not just allowing this whole context or these whole fears to lead me. So I'm trying to lead where I'm at by getting to know myself, but it's not a one-time deal. So it's a continuous reviewing on who I've become and what is the impact of these experiences in me. And the way I do that personally, I'm not going into the details right now, but I feel like if we look into the DMAIC model, you can go ahead, Richard, is this constant balance between the child want to go back, and then don't destroy the child, keep the child with you, but as I become aware of my patterns and who I've become and where I want to head, try to lead it. And using the DMAIC model, we are continuous improvement leaders, so I'm not going to go into the details, but if we think about it as a circle evaluation of what kind of, what is my purpose and how I can act on it, but by being very specific and have these SMART goals and things we have talked a lot in DMAIC, it's pretty easy. But it's a constant change, and it's a constant evaluation for me. So I'm not going to keep it too long. Like
backwards here. All right, so if I could just kind of reflect on that for a moment, and then I'll turn it over to Kiran and ask her this question. But a couple of things that I heard. So Doug, started by talking about, this leadership journey really starts with, before you can lead others, you really have to lead yourself. And part of leading yourself is managing your own emotions, managing your experiences. And Sidita talked about, one of the things that stood out is this idea of reflecting. You have to think, you have to reflect, you have to take the time to think about your experiences and process them. And then also you have to do this because the context of your life can change. You also have to continuously review. So Kiran, let me ask you, like, you're a busy mother and entrepreneur and business leader and volunteer. Like, when you think about leading yourself, how do you think about it?
Great question, and Sidita, thank you. It was a lot of good points that I could kind of try to visualize myself in my past life, and you can resonate with so many great points there. So when this question comes to me, it is a question that I would say periodically, at least recently, since after I started my business, I probably do this drill quarterly. Ask a question of, who am I? What do I want in my life? Why do I want that in my life? And then go to, how will I achieve it and when will I achieve it? So those are sort of a principle, basic W's and H that I use periodically to just filter through some basic, clear out my mind. I would say discard what is not working for me, what is not serving me, and then make the space for the new beginnings. And this year's theme is new beginnings, so works perfectly for leading self. How I define leading self is pretty much your core values of self-management. So if I were to think about myself, I would say manage things with an authority but be humble, right? Manage your time, learn how to manage your time, but what is the purpose? What is the purpose of how you're allocating and prioritizing your stuff? And then just be a displayment and maintain emotional health around you, right? So be very effective communicator. We all are great communicators, but how effective are you is what demonstrates the difference between others and you. So leading self technically is a way of taking these core values that you value so much, and then bringing in new approaches, new tools around you, new techniques around you to realize how you can create a strategy of your own to be a leader. So we come across so many great leaders, but when one is different than other is basically the foundation of their core value and what strategies they applied with the tools and techniques they picked from everywhere and their own personality and what they became. And why leading self should be the first one is just learning, like cooking a recipe, you know, some kind of a food. You can conquer, once you have conquered how that recipe can be repeatably created, then it is so easy to teach somebody else as a team to compare it or to apply it in a training class, and that's what an organization stands for. So that is the reason leading self stands first. And for me, given some different hats that I got to wear throughout the day, and that's why I should probably say, pardon me for any noise it may come, because I'm getting my house painted right now, and I literally had to get out of my office because it's all jumbled up and find a corner where I can sit and do it. So it's again managing your time in around all these kind of different environments that you get thrown to. But how do you manage with the purpose? And in my case, my purpose is to practice staying calm all the time. So that's something I've been practicing last 2 months, to stay in positive mind and be in the present moment and be always calm. So once you have underlined what your core values are, that means the most to you, then all you got to do is in between find where you can get that, how you can learn that, how can you practice that to become the leader that you want to become. So I think for me, that's the 3 steps that I utilize.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kiran. That's great. Let me just kind of reflect on what I heard, the things that stood out to me, right? You start this process by asking those critical questions. You know, who am I in my life right now? What do I want? That's an important question. Why do I want it? That's the other, I think, important follow-up to that, because sometimes people will say, well, I want this or I want that, but you don't really go that level deeper to say, well, why do I want that thing? Or why do I want that experience? Why do I want to make that change? And then really getting into the specifics about, okay, how am I going to do this? How am I going to make that change? And then when specifically, because keeping, we think about goals and goal setting and goals needing to be specific and measurable and actionable and timely and all that, like thinking about, okay, well, I want something or I want to make some change, but how am I going to do it and when am I going to do it? So, before I put it back out to the 3 of you around like how this idea of managing yourself has changed over your life, I want to ask a follow-up, Kiran, like, you mentioned you have a lot going on right now. Like, how do you find the time to do the self-care, practice staying calm, as you said, like in the midst of a busy life or busy context of your life, like how do you find the time to do that?
I think one key thing that I realized over the last 2 years, I would say, I'm saying 2 years because COVID did allow me to save my travel time and really practice more self-management and having a me time. And that's also the same time I was going through transition after I started my business, which was 2 years in. And I was trying to balance out where I'm giving the best to my clients, to my business, and being very just, do all the justice I need to with my 3 girls and my family. But then where is me time? So 5 years ago when I transitioned, left automotive manufacturing and started my business, was the same drill I did, who, what, why, and then I realized that I did not want to work for automotive, different models rest of my life and retire like that. I thought I can do, I can do more. And that's how abruptly I left auto and started from scratch again to start my business. It was a first who, what, why that made me do it. And once you know who, what, why becomes your input, how is basically your process, right? So if we look at our quality patterns and all the techniques we apply in our organization, we have an input, we have a process, we have an outcome. So that how becomes your process of how you're going to do it, when it becomes your output, which is throwing an accountability on you so that you stay on track for that. Once you follow that fundamental 2 years ago, what I did was trying to find more of me time. And when I was trying to do me time it gets tricky because finding time for yourself is probably one of the last things, especially, I don't know, I should say that, but being a woman, it's even more challenging. And then being a mother of 3 girls that are in totally 3 different age groups becomes even more challenging. So what I did was I started getting up early, and I'm a person that's known to be late sleeper, party hard, work harder kind of thing. So get up early is not me at all. But I said, okay, I'm going to try it out. And as I did it, I learned that the morning time was the most peaceful time that I was having, where I controlled everything. I could do what I wanted to do. And I was a fresh body and a fresh soul with a fresh mind. So I started creating that as my me time. You know, do my few minutes, 20 minutes meditation. I started with 5 minutes, now I'm at 20. So do my meditation, go through my whole plan, look at my who, what, why again, because those purposes just ignite me in the morning. That, you know, I visualized that and I was like, this is what I want to do. So this today, if I have to do this, and sometimes when you look at your calendar, you look at 10 things and you're like, 7, you enjoy it, 3, you're like, do I have to really do it? But then when you look at your who, what, why, you're like, come on, Kiran, you can do it. So it gives you that push. And sometimes I think as leaders, when we're trying to upgrade ourselves, bring ourselves up, it gives you that push. It fuels you to get going. And I think that becomes a great starter. So by the time it's 8, 9 o'clock and the house is moving and you start hearing everybody's voice, you feel accomplished because you conquered something in 2, 3 hours, which pretty much may have taken you 5, 6 in a noisy time. And I think that's what has now allowed me to practice that all along, because I feel what I do in those top 2 hours dictates my rest of the day, my managing of my time, my mood for sure. And also it gives me that sense of green flag that I already did this much and you guys just woke up. Mm-hmm. I think those things really make your day going after that.
Okay, great. That's great. I love that. Fresh body, fresh soul, fresh mind. That's a good way to think about it. And you know, as we've said, you know, at the beginning, as Doug was mentioning earlier, you know, this leadership journey starts with yourself, right? Like leading yourself first. So related to that, what Kiran is describing, right, is your day starts with the morning, right? Like she talks about getting up early, right, and changing that habit, changing her, you know, way of being to now be able to accomplish the fresh body, fresh soul, fresh mind. So, but it starts with, your day starts in the morning, right? So you have to kind of build that strong foundation. So Doug, let me come back to you. Doug, you've spent most of your career working in large organizations, either the military or the Georgia State University system. How has this idea of your idea of leading self changed over the course of your career? How is that? Talk to us about that.
Okay, well, I'd first like to kind of explain my approach to leading self. I haven't done that yet. So let me do that, and then I'll jump into that question. When I think about leading self, I ask myself, what is leading self? What's it all about? And it's found self-awareness is key to leading self. We've talked about it. We've all mentioned the importance of really understanding all the different aspects of yourself. And Sidita talked about reflection and context changing, and that impacts, that reflection, that's all about developing your self-awareness. The core values that Kiran mentioned, very important to know what values guide your decision making. That is all about self-awareness. So there's that thread of self-awareness through the 3 of our presentations on leading self. I think there are 2 aspects of leading self that are key to successfully doing so. And that's around relationships. Relationships are key. No man is an island. You know, we all need other people to get things accomplished, whether it's in our personal life or professional life. So building good, solid relationships, and the other aspect is developing professionally. Understanding what knowledge, skills, and abilities are required for you to be successful in your career. And that kind of touches on some of the things Kiran mentioned, those questions that she asked. That's a great set of questions, Kiran, by the way. You know, it really is. I wrote them all down. So what kind of knowledge, skills, and abilities are we talking about? And Richard mentioned a little bit about this. He didn't specifically say emotional intelligence, but emotional intelligence is another key aspect of leading self. That also leads into the other two levels. And the great thing about emotional intelligence, it's not like IQ. Emotional intelligence is a skill. So if you haven't spent any time looking into emotional intelligence, it's damn near foundational to really developing your self-awareness, and then taking that self-awareness and helping it build good, solid relationships with other people, as well as understanding what you need to do as an individual to improve your professional skills. So emotional intelligence, some other aspects of leading self would be having a good sense of what motivates you, good decision making, gathering data and making sure that you have good data to make good decisions. Critical thinking, we don't see much of that much anymore, but understanding the critical thinking process and executing that process when you're answering the questions that Kiran mentioned. Influence and accountability are other aspects of leading self. So for those of you that may or may not know, there are assessments out there that will really provide data for you on many of these areas that we've talked about, and I would encourage you to go out onto the web and see what's out there. And if you have any questions about it, I think Richard mentioned that we're going to give you our email addresses. You're certainly welcome to email me on that. So that's what leading self is for me. You know, how has it changed over the years? I think emotional intelligence is really something that as I said, it's a skill, and it's a skill that you have to practice. You have to become aware of that particular skill and practice those things that you need to do to improve your emotional intelligence. So for me, when I think back to when I was in my 20s, wow. I mean, I look at it now and it's like, okay, how did you make it through that, you know? But as we age, you do develop a different perspective on things, and emotional intelligence has been, I think, the key change for me with regard to leading self over the years.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Doug. That's great. Let me just, what I heard in what you said, right, those two aspects of what we're talking about, right? One, like, even though we talk about self-awareness, self-reflection, as you said, we don't live on an island, right? Like, we exist in relationships, and relationships are important, whether it's family relationships, coworker relationships, peer group relationships. That's just so important. And then the other part that you said is the developing professionally. Like, again, what knowledge, skills, and abilities are important to you? How is that changing? How are you going to acquire those new knowledge, skills, or abilities? Or what are the things that you're really good at? And then the importance of emotional intelligence. You know, I know this is something that's very important to me. I did a presentation at the Lean Six Sigma conference last year on emotional intelligence for leaders. And so you should check that out. That's another terrific resource. But a lot of our underlying framework really touches on the essential components of emotional intelligence. And as you heard Doug just explained now, right, that's the piece that has changed for him over the course of a successful career. But going back to what he said at the beginning, right, self-reflection and this relationship between self-awareness and self-reflection, right? You've heard this theme from all three of our speakers that in order to be aware, right, self-aware, you have to take the time to do that self-reflection, either through, journaling, spending time alone, through some of these other activities, right? That's how you achieve that level of self-awareness, because you can't be there for the other people in your life if you haven't been there for yourself and you haven't done that work to sort of reflect on what it is you want. How are you driven? What motivates you, right? Like, these are all important questions to ask yourself, and you need the time. You need to take the time to ask yourself those questions. So speaking of time, we're about 45 minutes in. We have about 15 minutes left. Let me just pause briefly and ask the panelists if you've seen anything coming through the chat that we might want to respond to. Otherwise, we'll keep going with our questions.
I don't see anything on the chat. I did open it to them. I have it blocked as question and answer. So if they are trying to write on question and answer, please use the chat. We'd like to know from you as well. As we said, there is no cut formula for this. The more we learn from our own experience, but also from other people's perspectives, that would be interesting to see how that's done around different people and different experiences.
Yeah, someone in the chat asked, how do we define leading self?
Yeah, that's just a question.
Yeah. I mean, I think it really all goes to the notion of self-management, which is one aspect of emotional intelligence. There are like 4 different quadrants with regard to the knowledge base around emotional intelligence. And self-management is certainly one of those. And I think that's, I mean, a lot can be said about leading self, but that's a short way to say it.
Yeah, I think the textbook definition around it, as Doug said, emotional intelligence typically is comprised of 4 or 5 areas, right? The first is just being aware of your own emotions, right? Like being aware of your emotions. And the core emotions are happy, sad, glad, and anger, right? Mad or fear. And so just being aware of those in yourself, and then managing those to get things done in your life, right? Important thing. But the other half of that, as Doug mentioned, to emotional intelligence, is being aware of the emotions in other people, right? And then the final part is, right, being able to navigate the emotional relationships with other people, right? Like, that's how you kind of round out this definition of emotional intelligence. But it starts with yourself and being aware of those things in yourself. And we all know people who are hardly even aware of their own emotional state, right? Because they can't control their own emotions, so they can't. They easily get succumb to their own emotions. So let me take it back to Sidita and ask you, like, how over the course of your life, like, how has your definition of leading self changed over the course of your life or over the course of your career?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it narrow since we're trying to leave the time as well. But there are 4 aspects when I thought about it today that I noticed that the way I led myself has changed. Not on the how, more on the what kind of areas. So I noticed that what drives me has changed. Not just the goal itself, but where I go. So if in my early years I was like, I am a very curious person in nature, and I would naturally go wherever I see something new to learn. So I was going initially, whatever was shining. If we think about the sky and the shining stars, I would go and try to reach them all. I would still want to go. I still have that urge in me, but I don't notice that with time, I then started going, where is the shiniest star? So that's, that's the best, that's the top. That's how I ended up in US, for example, because it was this idea of whatever you want to achieve, you go, you get it there, the right people, if you put your work there, whatever dream job was in the movies. And then now I started seeing, because this shift and coming back of 20 years, which was unwanted, it forces me, and I wanted to add that to what Kiran was saying before about how she tries to manage her time and be aware of the values and the priorities. Sometimes it's the experience itself that it's forcing us to take this time. Like, I had plenty of time in the US, and after 5 I was free. I was not having a crazy busy work. Even though it was not traditional work experience for someone who is in the US, but I felt like I had more time focused on reflection because I was forced to. When I moved here, there was no market for me and I had a lot of time to think. And that actually made me realize what are those priorities, what are those core values for me. So when it comes to driving force, that changed for me. A couple of recommendations I would like people to read about is Viktor Frankl. That has helped me a lot in defining what is my purpose, which is always to actually care and give and serve and continuously improve for myself and for others. So that became much clearer when I read his story, and you are in a life or death situation there. So unless you know there is no other time to know. And Alan Watts, Become What You Are, that was another book that really kept me down to earth, also being okay on being my natural self, even though that might not be taking me right away to those goals without writing a piece of paper every single year. So we need also to not be so crazy about the goal itself, but focus on the process as well. Dale Carnegie, Lincoln the Unknown, I felt like his story was very natural and very authentic as a journey, and I felt like very linking to me. Benjamin Hardy, Personality is Impermanent, so personality as well changes. He talks about like think of the future self and act as if you are right now. That was adding a lot of purpose for me. And we had a speaker last year, Vetrival Yanakiraman, on our webinars. He talks about and wrote a book about spiritual leadership. It's 100% about leading self. I recommend that as well. And there was a recent article I read about learn to learn. That's something that those goals, we want them, but sometimes I feel like they are too hard to get, or the actions you have to take are not like our own drive right away. And that article talks a lot about how you can make this, understand this why. So what's the aspiration? If I get it done, what I'm going to get back? Becoming aware and curious if other people do those, but that's what we need to do as well. Maybe be curious and ask and see why they're interested in those, and see if it triggers. If this webinar is triggering something in you, maybe you do need to do more of this self-reflection, and just not the awareness portion, but also then act on it, as Doug was mentioning before, and become self-management as well. Vulnerability is okay to fail. That actually helped me when I think about changing over time. Change direction. So if initially I was focused on leading others, I was always a student ambassador, blah, 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 always like right there on top. But then I started realizing that because of my work actually went to continuous improvement, I was just trying to change others, lead others. I was trying more to prove it to myself than to others, because I really love that job. So the purpose and the intention there was really clear and very positive, but I was so focused on leading others that I was not focused on what I was not maybe doing the right way, even though because I justified myself, oh, but I have good intentions. This is about improvement. The whole organization should be into it, and I was not putting myself in other people's shoes who maybe they were not so passionate about continuous improvement. They are not had the circumstances to take them to see that, or they had a different level of awareness. I was not putting myself in their shoes to bring them to that level. If they wanted to be brought, you can't just force it. So that changed, the direction of my focus basically changed. The perspective also changed for me. Initially, I was like, if I had interviews and someone was asking me, give us an example when you failed, I would bring you an example and be perfect in the answer, but deep down, I didn't feel I was the one wrong. But now when I ask about, like when I respond, I can give you an example. I know that I messed up, and I really have no issues on saying it out loud. So I've been more structured in the way I lead my time, but we can share more details on how we do it here, and that's something that's good.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Sidita. I know we've got about a few minutes left here, but I do want to come back to Kiran and Doug on this question, because I've always loved to get a good book recommendation, and I'll turn it over to Kiran here in a minute. But maybe while Kiran is answering, and then Doug, Sidita, if you can put in the chat some of those authors that you mentioned, you know, Viktor Frankl, Alan Watts, Dale Carnegie. If you could just post those
list,
in
actually,
the chat.
we could share.
That would be great. So I'll turn to Kiran first, and then to Doug. Like, what resources do you use, books or articles that have been important to you in this journey?
I think reading is something I 100% do. I probably at least read 2 hours, whether it's having a book in my hand, or whether it's listening, or whether it was audible while I was going for my walk. So that's a must-have for me to keep my thoughts going. The model that I was saying about who, what, why, how, when is something that has absolutely made a huge, huge difference in the last couple of years as I was funneling through different phases and getting into the next directions and new beginnings I wanted to. What I learned when I was applying, so that 5-word, the second what was probably the last one I added, which probably I added 6 months ago. As I was trying to go through the who, why, how, when, it was something was missing, and I figured out I have not nailed down deep what do I want. I literally started asking for a week, what the hell you want, Kiran? What the hell you want? It was literally doing that to really go deep into figuring out. And the more you're scribbling that, your mind starts settling and figuring out who you are, what you want to do in future. Things that I learned out of that is there are internal and external forces that impact the success and the journey of it. One, whatever you're doing as you're growing, you want to make sure you're enjoying it with happiness. You're not doing something to add work to yourself, add stress to yourself, but your journey should be a happy journey. And then make sure what are the obstacles to get to that outcome that you're trying to achieve. So 3 things I learned. Gotta know what our shortcomings are. We have to know what we are really good at. I literally have done a SWOT on myself. What are my weaknesses? What are my threats? Am I biased to anything? Do I have some opinions that are embedded in me? And that's where, your culture, your upbringing, all those things kind of come up of why your opinions are like that. You have to be aware of that. 2, do a self-check every day. Every day reflect on yourself. It not only allows you to eliminate any kind of daily stress that you pick upon, that I had to do this and I didn't do 3, oh, that's why I didn't have a good sleep. I'm one person, my plate is full, but I tell you, when somebody says I didn't have a good sleep, I tell them, I sleep 4 hours, but when I sleep like a baby. So only reason that is working for me is I declutter my brain when I go to bed. So I do my morning ritual, I do my night ritual, sleep with a clean brain. When you start in the morning, reflect on your day. So in the night, reflect on your day spent. In the morning, reflect forward to your day that you have planned, and it allows you to align your brain. The third thing is regulate your feeling. I think this is the last one I've been juggling through. So you have figured out a method and you have like an armor around you. This is what I'm meant to do. What do you do when people from outside are going to impact you? You're at work, somebody lost their mind, somebody said something to you, you got delayed because of somebody else. All those external things that are happening around you, what do you do? So this is where you have to find your own technique, how you're going to regulate your feeling when something happens which wasn't in your game plan or wasn't according to you. Are you going to count to 10? Sometimes I've done that too. 1, 2, 3. I literally count in my head 10 and then I answer. Sometimes I just repeat what that person has said. And what it does is when I say it, it not only helps you with effective communication because you're reiterating what the person said for them to acknowledge that you were listening, but it also calms down your emotion because you took your time to answer or repeat that. So there's different ways to do that, but these 3 things are the ones that actually help me making it effective. Shortcomings, reflection, regulate your feelings.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Kiran. Some great ideas there. And Doug, maybe let's close it out with you, and then we'll have some final comments. I see you've been posting some good ideas in the chat, but anything that stood out to you over the years?
Well, I think emotional intelligence is of the books that I put out there. I think emotional intelligence impacted my life the most when I really began to understand emotion, my emotional quotient, my emotional intelligence, and being more in tune with them and how that impacts me as an individual with regard to how I act with myself and with other people. And then I put some other books in there that I think would be beneficial for folks.
Okay, I'm going to click through the last slide here. All right. Well, thank you, Doug. Thanks for posting those ideas in the chat. We're at the top of the hour, and we want to be mindful and respectful of everyone's time. We know your time is important. So thank you for attending. Hopefully you got at least one or two good ideas from this hour and have been able to make some connections here to us and to the work that we do. But we thank you for your attendance, and thank you for spending your afternoon, part of your afternoon with us wherever you are. Here are some ways to get in touch with us through IASQ or various channels on LinkedIn. I didn't post any of our specific emails on here, but if you reach out to us through my ASQ or through LinkedIn, we'll get you in touch if there's some specific people that you want to reach out to or ask more questions of. So again, thank you for taking the time out with us. We've got some good conversation going here in the chat, but look forward to our next session in about 3 months, which will be on leading others, leading teams. We'll round out the series towards the end of the year. But thank you again. Thanks to our panelists for all your thoughts and ideas. This has been great.
Thank you, Richard, for being a great host, coordinator.
Yeah,
and can request everyone to, we would love to hear feedback, so that this is something new we're starting. So we would love to hear what you liked and what else you would like to hear or what we can improve upon.
That, and we will send an email within these days about the RUs for those who attended 40 minutes minimum as usual. And as Kiran was saying, feedback, but also new speakers, new topics, that's on the survey. So feel free to share your experience with this webinar and what you'd like in future panel discussion and other ways we're trying to deliver content to you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.